The hospital at night had its own kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, watchful quiet where the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional beeping monitors filled the air like restless ghosts. Eric pushed his mop bucket slowly down the long corridor. His shift had started at sundown, and by now, most visitors had gone home. He'd gotten used to this routine, cleaning the forgotten hours, keeping the halls shining while the world slept. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and steady kept his daughter fed. He glanced at the watch strapped loosely around his wrist. Past 10. By now, his little girl, Marin, would be tucked under the covers in their small apartment, probably holding the stuffed bunny he'd given her last Christmas. The thought of her smile gave him the strength to keep moving even as his shoulders ached from hours of work. Then he heard it, a muffled sob. It came from a waiting area halfway down the corridor. Eric slowed, pushing his mop aside, listening. The sound wasn't faint. It was the raw, breaking cry of a child. Rounding the corner, he saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sat curled up on one of the vinyl chairs, her knees hugged to her chest. Her dark hair fell over her face, her body shaking with each sob. Beside her sat a half-empty juice box and a crumpled tissue. The nurses behind the glass desk were busy shuffling papers, their voices low, distracted. Patients wheeled past, doctors hurried through, but no one had stopped. Eric's chest tightened. He knew that cry. He'd heard it from Marin on nights she woke from nightmares, or when the world felt too big for her small shoulders. He walked over slowly, crouching down so his eyes were level with the girl's. "Hey there," he said gently. "Looks like the tears found you, huh?" The girl startled, peeking up at him. Her eyes were red and swollen. She sniffled but didn't answer, hugging her knees tighter. Eric didn't push. He knew kids needed space as much as comfort. He glanced around, then patted his pocket, and smiled. "Know what I keep with me?" he asked softly. He pulled out a small, half-squeezed bottle of soap bubbles. He always carried it during his shifts. It had started as something to surprise Marin with when she visited him at work, but over time it had become a habit, a small reminder of joy tucked into his uniform. The girl blinked, curiosity flickering through her sadness. "Wanna see a trick?" Eric asked. Without waiting, he twisted the cap, dipped the wand, and blew gently. A stream of bubbles floated out, catching the fluorescent light. Shimmering orbs drifted across the sterile waiting room, glowing with tiny rainbows. One landed on the girl's sleeve and popped, leaving behind a little glisten of soap. Her sobs slowed. Another bubble floated higher, then another, until the space around them seemed softer, lighter. The girl lowered her arms slightly, her eyes following the bubbles as they bobbed through the air. Eric grinned. "Pretty cool, huh? They don't last long, but while they're here, they make the world a little brighter." The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Can I try?" "Of course," he said, handing her the wand carefully. She dipped it into the bottle with shaky hands and blew. At first, nothing happened. Eric chuckled softly. "Gotta blow slow, like you're telling a secret." She tried again. This time, a perfect bubble floated out, wobbling before it caught the light. Her face lit up, and for the first time, Eric saw her smile. "There you go," he said. "Told you you've got magic in you." The girl giggled, a sound far lighter than her tears from moments before. She blew again, filling the air with bubbles, her earlier sobs dissolving into concentration and wonder. Eric sat back on his heels, watching her. His own heart softened. He remembered Marin's laughter the first time he'd shown her the same trick, how she'd chased bubbles across their tiny living room. The memory ached and healed him at the same time. After a while, the girl leaned back in the chair, calmer now. She hugged the bubble bottle to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, almost shyly. Eric gave her a warm smile. "Anytime. Just remember, when things feel too heavy, sometimes you just need to blow them out into the air. Like bubbles. Let them float away." The girl nodded, her breathing even now. Eric stood, picking up his mop again, but he glanced at her one last time. The crisis had passed, replaced by little light in her eyes. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that just a few feet away, at the end of the corridor, a woman had been watching. Elegant, poised, her presence commanding even in the shadows. Her heart, however, was trembling. Because she had just witnessed a janitor calm her daughter in seconds, in a way no one else had managed all day. And this moment, small and tender as it seemed, was about to change both their lives forever. The next night, Eric was back on duty. The hospital hummed with its usual symphony of sounds, rolling carts, muffled conversations, the distant beeping of monitors. He pushed his mop quietly across the tile, his thoughts drifting, as they often did, to his daughter Marin. He wondered if she'd remembered to finish her homework or if she'd fallen asleep with crayons scattered across the kitchen table. But his mind also kept circling back to the girl he had comforted with bubbles the night before. He hadn't asked her name. He hadn't pried into her pain. He'd simply done what felt right. Still, the look in her eyes, the way her tears had given way to laughter, lingered with him like a soft echo. He didn't know he would see her again so soon. Halfway through his shift, Eric was wiping down a bench when he heard a familiar voice call, "Mom." He looked up and saw the same little girl from last night bounding down the hall. No tears this time. She was radiant, clutching a stuffed bear in one hand and the bubble bottle in the other. Eric smiled despite himself. "Hey, bubble maker," he said warmly. Her eyes lit up. She ran toward him and stopped just short, out of breath. "I told my mom about you," she said eagerly. "I told her about the bubbles." Before Eric could respond, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. The woman. She was tall, elegant, her posture regal in a tailored navy suit. Her heels clicked against the tile with steady assurance. Her hair was swept neatly back, and her presence commanded attention. But it wasn't her wealth or confidence that struck Eric, it was the way her eyes softened when they fell on her daughter. The girl hurried back to her side, grabbing her hand and tugging. "That's him, Mom. That's the man I told you about." The woman's gaze shifted to Eric. For a second, he felt the urge to step back, suddenly self-conscious in his scuffed shoes and janitor's uniform. He wiped his palms on his trousers, not sure what to do with his hands. The woman approached slowly, her daughter clinging happily to her side. When she stopped in front of him, Eric noticed the faint shimmer in her eyes, as though she had been holding back tears. "You're the one who helped my daughter yesterday," she said softly. Eric cleared his throat. She seemed upset. "I just tried to help." The woman tilted her head, studying him. "Tried? You did more in 5 minutes than 3 specialists managed in a day." Her voice wavered with both gratitude and disbelief. She hadn't calmed down since the accident. "And then you came along, with bubbles." Eric glanced at the little girl, who was beaming. He shrugged. "Kids don't always need big solutions. Sometimes they just need to feel safe. My daughter loves bubbles. They always cheer her up. I figured it was worth a try." The woman's lips curved into a fragile smile. She extended a hand. "I'm Catherine Hartwell." Eric hesitated, then shook it. Her handshake was firm, but her touch lingered as though she wanted him to know her gratitude was more than words. "I don't know how to thank you," Catherine said. "You gave my daughter something I couldn't, in that moment, peace." "It was nothing," Eric replied quickly. Any father would have done the same. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're a father." "Yes," Eric said, and a small smile tugged at his lips. "Marin, she's 8. The bubbles were hers, really. I just borrow them." Catherine glanced at her daughter, who was now blowing tiny bubbles in the corner, giggling as they floated toward the ceiling. When she looked back at Eric, her expression had changed, softer, more intent. "You work here as a janitor?" she asked carefully. "Yes, ma'am. Nights here, days on construction sites." He kept his tone light, but there was no disguising the exhaustion in his voice. She was quiet for a moment, her eyes scanning him as though weighing more than his words. Finally, she said, "Do you know who I am?" Eric blinked, caught off guard. "No, should I? I'm the majority owner of this hospital," she said evenly. "Hartwell Enterprises, and several others besides." The revelation hit him like a wave. A billionaire. That explained the elegance, the commanding presence. He felt heat rise in his cheeks, suddenly more aware of the mop bucket standing beside him, the faint stains on his uniform. But Catherine's gaze was unwavering. "And yet, for all the power and resources I have, I couldn't reach my daughter the way you did. You gave her something priceless, compassion. That's not something money can buy." Eric swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. I just did what any parent would. Exactly, Catherine said, her voice firm. And that's why I don't want this to end here. He looked at her in confusion. I want you to stay, she said simply. Not just as a janitor. Not even just as an employee. I want you to join us, as someone who can help me shape initiatives for children, families, people who need more than medicine. Someone who understands heart. The words left Eric stunned. He had spent years unseen, pushing mops through halls where no one remembered his name. And now, standing before him, the owner of it all was offering him a seat at her table, because of soap bubbles and sincerity. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say yes, Catherine replied, her eyes glistening with quiet determination. Because men like you are rare, and the world needs more of what you carry. He glanced again at the little girl, who was chasing a stray bubble down the hall, her laughter echoing like bells. Then he thought of Marin at home, waiting for him with crayons on the table. For the first time in years, Eric felt something he thought he'd lost, not just hope, but the belief that his kindness, his small, unremarkable acts, might matter more than he ever imagined. And as Catherine's hand extended again, this time not just in gratitude, but in opportunity, Eric realized that sometimes the smallest gestures ripple into the greatest changes.